How to deploy FastAPI with Docker to Google Cloud Run. The reason this is important is because you get all the power of Kubernetes without the pain. This allows you to focus on what's important, which is making real products and getting them into the hands of customers. The power of Google Cloud is its ability to scale up to effectively infinity, and also, more importantly, scale down to zero. This allows you to automatically handle large spikes in traffic if your app goes viral, but you don't pay for it until you actually make it. Another big benefit, and really big benefit, I would say, of using Cloud Run is the reduced skill set required to build and deploy it. So you don't need expensive DevOps engineers or a team with years of Kubernetes experience. You can get away with a lone developer without having to compromise on the end result. So what you need to follow along, don't worry, everything's free, is a GitHub account. You can fork my repo, or you can use a demo from GCP. It's up to you, but you're trying to get hands-on with this, so ideally I'd say fork the repo and use it to follow along with. A Google account, you do need to have billing activated, but as I mentioned, this scales down to zero, and when it does get used, it's super cheap. So you don't actually worry about having to actually pay for anything. Optionally, you can use VS Code to follow along with this, so you can have the repo open, you can push to the main branch and watch it build out automatically. I'm using VS Code with dev containers, so my setup is always going to be the same, and you can have the exact same experience as me and follow along with me. Tutorial number 1 of this playlist shows you how to set it up. So there's lots of ways to deploy to Google Cloud Run. You'll see a cloudbuild.yaml file in the repo. This is one way to do it, and this is how you can actually do it via the command line. So I've got some instructions in the README on how to effectively just log in, authorize your account. So you're using the command line that's connected to your Google account. Make a new project if you need to. Set up billing. This is just from the command line, and then enable APIs and deploy it. So this is a slightly more complicated way, and it's something that you can use if you want to make it into something that would probably be more akin to a corporate setup than a private setup. But in this world of MVPs and getting things out there quickly, I'm going to say probably don't do this. The cloud build there is cloudbuild.yaml file is here if you do need it. There's a better way to do it, and there's not an automated way to do it, and that's what we're going to do today. So instead of using the command line, we're going to use cloud build from source, which allows you to point GCP to your GitHub, and then every time a trigger such as the main branch having a new commit sets it off, it will build out the application. If it runs and it can successfully deploy, it will deploy that new application to the same URL. So automatically deploying your application without any developer involvement at all. They just have to write their code. Once it merges with master, it makes its way to production. Again, this is something that normally you'd need a team for. All sorts of stuff that is just different skill sets, lots of expensive knowledge that you can totally avoid all of that. You can just get straight to building your application and deploying it out into the world. So let's get started by creating a new project and then enabling the APIs. So if you head over to a browser, this is the API that we're actually going to deploy, just so you can see it. If you head over to a browser, type in Google Cloud login, and then log into Google Cloud. If you've got an account, you just need to log in. If you don't have an account, then just make one and make sure you set up billing. So type in billing, and in there you'll be able to add your account and your card details so that it'll allow you to use these services like Cloud Run. So once you've done that, we're going to make a new project. So just in the search bar, type in projects, and you'll see this. It says create a project in I am an admin. You want to select that. My new project demo Zach 1. You might not have an organization. It doesn't make a difference. The project is still going to work just the same. So press create and just wait for that to build out. And once it's built, it'll say select the project. It might even select it automatically for us. There we go. Select project. Cool. So now I've got our new project. You'll see here, this is how you actually select different projects. New project, demo Zach 1. So if you end up lost and you're not in the right place, just select this again. You'll be able to select your project. If you're working on multiple, that's how you navigate back to it. The first thing we're going to do is just have a quick look at the APIs section. So just type in APIs, select this APIs and services, and then enabled APIs and services. So the way that it works in Google is they've got a whole list of different products that you can use, but by default, almost all of them are disabled. And when you browse to them for the first time, sometimes it'll enable them if you do browse to them via the console. You can also enable them through the command line, which is what we would be doing down here. G-Cloud services enable, and then each service that you want to enable. So in this case, that'd be the building, the cloud run, and artifact registry, where you actually save the artifacts or the Docker images that we create. But if you just click enable APIs, you'll see all of these different APIs. And we'll just type in cloud run, admin, cloud run, configuration. Let's just see what happens when I type that. You see there's lots of different APIs that can be enabled potentially. So instead of actually enabling it within the API section, I just wanted to show you where that was. We're going to enable it by just browsing to Cloud Run the service. So you type in Cloud Run in the top search bar, this top option, Cloud Run serverless for containerized applications, select that, and it'll load up here. Now, this may have already been enabled for mine, potentially because there we go. Clicking create service will enable the Cloud Run admin API. So it's giving you a little message here and what we were just talking about there. So we're going to do what it says. We're going to click create a service. Now I've got three different options on creating a service, and these are just how we're going to build this and where it's going to come from. So the code currently was written here inside VS Code. Then it was saved to our GitHub, which is profit from GPT experiment. So if we just browse to that, you can see GitHub, profit from AI / GitHub experiment. This is a public repo, so you should be able to just browse this and fork it. And to fork it, you first of all head over here, and then it says I can't fork my own branch because obviously it's mine. But you would have your own account and you'd browse to here and you'd select fork, and that would replicate this into your own environment, so you can then save to your own Git repo. It won't be trying to save to mine. Okay, so the three different ways to deploy artifact registry and Docker Hub. So if you wanted to use the command line like we would have done here, we could either take all of the code, wrap it all together, put it inside a Docker container, and then we could push it up to Docker, or we could push it up to artifact registry. An artifact registry is the Google equivalent of sort of the Docker Hub. It's just a safe space to store all of your images. That's one way. That's what you would do with the command line. You wouldn't have to come in here. The second way, which is the one that we're going to use, is GitHub. So this is connecting directly to a repository, and then you can just have triggers, like I've said. So the main branch, for example, when that gets updated, it'll just pick that up automatically, and it'll just build it out to Google. So this connects these two directly together, which is great. And finally, this is just an alternative to both of these. This is for writing functions, and we're going to be making a full application, so it's going to ignore that for now. So select the middle option, GitHub, and then set up with cloud build. This is going to ask us to authenticate with GitHub, so you'll have to put your GitHub credentials in there. And it's just got to enable cloud build, so it's enabling some more APIs. Repositories provider, unable to list repositories, manage connected repositories. So mine was already connected, but usually when you select manage connected repositories, it'll ask you to log in, and then it'll ask you to install the GitHub I think it's the GitHub app, and it'll ask you to either install it on one of the repositories or all of them. I've just selected all of them, and that allows you to select any of the repositories in here so you can build them out to Google. The repo that we're going to be using is GPT experiment because we're actually going to connect this to GPT afterwards, and then tick this box saying I understand. Sign your life away, and then press next. There we go. So now we've selected our repo, the next step is deciding how we want to actually build this out. So you'll see in here, this is just a little bit of, you'll see in here, this is a little bit of regex, so starts with main. So this is saying it's going to build on the main branch. You can see under here, use regular expression to match for a specific branch name. And if you want to see exactly what this is doing, you can just drop it into GPT. What is this regex? So anchor the match to the start of the string. We want to match the literal string main, anchors the match to the end of the string. So main will only match if the entire string is exactly main. It would not match main123, mainly, or something main. There you go. So we're going to leave that as it is because our main branch is what we want to build from. Build types, there's two build types. There's use a Docker file or build it using a build pack. Now I have tried to do the build pack version, which I originally was hoping to be able to do, but when you try and build out a FastAPI app to Cloud Run, it detects it and thinks that it's a Flask app instead of a FastAPI app, so it tries to start it up in the wrong way. So instead of doing that and to make it more consistent in the build process and know that it'll actually work every time, I've opted for the Docker file, which we went through in a previous tutorial. I'll just take a quick look at it. So this is the Docker file that we're going to use. It's inside the repo, and in the previous tutorial we went through all the steps here to explain what it does, but effectively it's just taking all of the code, wrapping it up, installing the requirements, and then once it's done all of that, it's going to copy just what it needs to a distroless image, so a really small image, and then wrap that up and tell it how to start. So that's why we're going to choose Dockerfile, and it's in the root location. It's already been set up. This is at the root location of this, so we can just leave this as it is. So all we need to do is press save. The cloud build trigger will be created once you create the service. So there's a few more options that we need to choose. First of all, just US West 2. It's cheap, and I just choose it every time for all these experiments. The default HTTPS endpoint URL for the new service. So this is giving us the URL that we're going to be able to browse to. Allow unauthenticated invocations or require authentication. Now in the real world, require authentication is what you would use if you had a front end connecting to this, but in our circumstance, we're just making this as an experiment to test and connect to ChatGPT. So unless you know this URL, you can't actually browse to it anyway. So I'm just going to say allow unauthenticated invocations. With a CPU allocation, because we're trying to scale down to 0, we can just leave all the defaults, but there's really only two options, and one of them means you can have a cold start, which means on the first instance that this gets called, it will take slightly longer because it's got to spin up that Docker image. It's still pretty quick, but then after that first image, that first hit has happened, as long as it's not taking too much time, every request after that will be really fast. The alternative to this is to have CPU always allocated, but that means that you've got to keep on paying for this even when users aren't hitting it. And finally, ingress control. If this was an application that was connected to it could be a database, it could be other APIs or a front end or whatever it is, they all could live within Google Cloud as well. So you could have it so that this is only available internally, and that means the traffic wouldn't go out into the public internet. But for our case, we're just going to allow access from everywhere. And we can ignore all this stuff down here. This is to do with permanent storage volumes and that kind of stuff. So we don't actually need to change any of that. We are actually going to add one more thing since it's given us the URL. We're going to copy this URL endpoint, which is what we'll browse to once it's ready. And then I know we said we weren't going to go in there, but inside containers, volumes, networking, security, if we just head over to container, variable, inside containers, slightly further down next to settings, in variables and secrets, we are going to add a variable. I'm going to paste that URL in as the value. And then just so you know what we're actually doing here. In the application, we've said in this config file that we're going to add a little extra to the OpenAPI schema. We're going to add the servers section, and we're going to pull it from an environment variable called base_URL. That's what this is doing here. os.getEnv. So get it from the environment variable and get the base URL. And if it can't find it, it'll default to localhost. So we just want to take base_URL, enter that as the name. So now, when the application is deployed, it's going to know where it lives. It's going to know this URL. So when we copy the OpenAPI spec and dump it into GPT, it knows what website to browse to. And everything else, we're just going to leave it as it is. And press create. Whilst that's creating, we're going to browse to the URL. So this URL here, if you select copy to clipboard, just open up a new tab and paste it in. Page is not found. Cool. Security, allow unauthenticated. So you can see it's completing. Finally, building and deploying from repository. So what this has done is it's gone to the Git repo, it's looked at the code, it's found this Docker file, and it's built this Docker file. And then in this temporary environment that it's created, the Docker image, it's pushed it up to artifact registry, which is a secure place in here in Google, artifact registry. So we'll just open that in a new tab. You'll see there's a new folder in here called Cloud Run Source Deploy. If we open that, GPT experiment. So it's created this image. And this is where you'll find different versions. If you select it, there'll be multiple versions that appear here. And then finally, it deploys it to Google Cloud. And these logs, you can watch them to see what all the steps are that it's doing. But looks like it's finished. Yeah. Great. So if we just browse to this URL again, this should work. Perfect. So this is a fully working application that's been deployed out to Google Cloud. And I've just selected, you see here, /openapi.json, which is what I was just typing out there, but you can just add openapi.json to the end of the URL. You'll get to the same place. And if we press pretty print and scroll right to the bottom, this servers section with the URL that I mentioned earlier, just copy that and then paste it to make sure it works. Yeah, and get back to the same place. So this server section is this extra bit that we've added here. That's all this is doing. Now, our application's deployed, and we've also got a continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline effectively set up. So we don't need to do that process again. Now, if we want to deploy to production, all we need to do is make a commit either to main or make a separate branch and then merge that into main. And so if you control access to that main branch, you can control what gets deployed to production. So in our circumstance, we are gonna just take, if we just head into routes, you can see all the different routes are in here. We're going to change this test commit to test demo. This happened automatically. Now to add our change, we're just going to open up a new terminal. So right click on the routes.py, the file that we're just in, open a new terminal, and then git add routes.py, git commit. So we've added the file to the staging area. Then we're going to make a commit. Let's add a message, test for demo. And finally, we're going to push this up. So it's, instead of just living locally, this has now made its way. We select this link to GitHub, which is great. So because we've connected this automatically, and we'll see in our project, I'm actually in cloud build right now. So if we just head back, cloud run, GPT experiment, and build history over here on the right. And this takes us to cloud build. So this is another area of GCP that is specifically responsible for building out these things. And we'll see this build has got a status with a little spinning blue circle, which means it's automatically taking those changes that we've just made, building them, pushing them up to artifact registry, and then once it's done, it's gonna, if it's successful, deploy it out to here. And we can select the build and we can watch what's happening. So you can see all the 3 steps. This is the build step. If you want to follow that, this is how it's using the Docker container. See all these different layers. So a Docker container builds in lots of layers, and if it's already done all the layers before, it can just start further down the line. Once it's done that, it will push it up to artifact registry, and finally, it's going to deploy it. So we'll just wait for that. Perfect. So that's now completed. So if we just head back to Cloud Run, and then select revisions, we can see the revision that's been deployed here. So let's test to see if it worked. Previously, this test commit is what we had in before. So if we just refresh this, now it says test demo, and then try again, execute. This happened automatically. Whoop. Now I've actually got 2 different projects connected to the same repo, so I'm going to see if it's picked up the same changes in the other repo. Test demo. Try it out. Yeah. So we've deployed this out twice to 2 separate projects automatically, and we didn't have to do a thing. All we had to do was save our code and carry on with our day. So in the next tutorial, I'm going to briefly go through how to connect this up to GPT so that you can talk to your new API in production directly from ChatGPT.